of industrial production was starting from natural resources. Then you have a production process, and then as outcome, you have products that you want to, and you have waste that you don't want to. And of course, it causes, massive environmental issues. So for the last, I would say probably about 30 or 40 years, the idea of industrial ecology, or the circular economy, or there's several different names, cradle to cradle concept. All of this are trying to close the loop, to negate the waste. So instead of seeing outcomes, kind of unwanted outcome of the industrial production as a waste, all these theories and all these activities, because again they are practical. There's a Kalundborg business district in Denmark that's from 60s started to do this. So started to use waste from one industrial process to as a kind of semi-product, semi-resource for another. So making connections and rejecting the very idea of the waste. This is what industrial ecology is about. And then when you think about this in a broader sense, in more almost kind of metaphorical sense, this is what I'm kind of taking from industrial ecology, that waste is something that shouldn't exist. We shouldn't waste anything, but it also means that on a social relationships, we shouldn't think about any relationship as a waste. We shouldn't think about a group of people that we just don't want it. So this idea of kind of trying to engage with the world fully, this is the essence of radical inclusivity. So in short, radical inclusivity is about solidarity and collaboration. So it's not about this and that, but it's exactly about this and that. And again, if you put it in a context of urban planning, for example, especially influenced by modernist urban planning, when you have zones, and there's a zone as a park, there's a zone for living, and there's industrial zones. So modernist planning was all about segregation, was about exactly about this or that. If you have a residential block, then you avoid industry. And of course, there was a deep sense, a deep meaning beyond that, because in 19th century, beginning of 20th century, industrial production could be dangerous. It was noisy, it was polluting. So of course, you try to keep away and to kind of protect residents of the city from industrial, from everything was dangerous to them. But as an outcome, as this kind of more kind of ontological outcome or aspects of a way of thinking that we have out of this, is this tendency to segregate, to create ghettos, to don't see, don't interact. And I find it problematic. I find it ethically problematic, something that should be overcome, should be questioned, should be discussed. But we need to realize that it's kind of easy for people from, philosophy or political science, when they are operating this kind of really kind of abstract sphere, when they are talking about inclusivity. For us, as people dealing with matter and space, we need, every time when we talk about any more kind of abstract social ideas, we need to realize that we are dealing with obstacles of matter and space. And space, which is kind of fundament of what we do as designers, space is not helping us, because space is not equal. Space is based on relationships. Space, even if you think about GIS or even think about kind of very, very simple kind of Cartesian definition of space, is defined by coordinates. And between these coordinates, between point A and point B, if these 2 points are not the same, there is always something, there is a space between them. And if you want to move from space or from point A to point B, you need to cross this space in between. You need to put some energy to move the object or yourself. You spend some time by making this route. So this is the essence of space. This is how space is constructed, and this is how we as designers are dealing with space. So idea of inclusion or inclusivity is facing this problem or the essence, the nature of space. And when I'm saying that space is rational, it also means that space is hierarchical. So there is a hierarchy in space. There are spaces that they are more important at some point because of certain reasons, and they are more important for certain individuals or certain group of people. So this set of hierarchies, this is also what define our being in space, our being in the city. This is, of course, the kind of open question, does hierarchy equal injustice? Which I think that the answer is yes. The hierarchy at least suggests or at least makes justice difficult. Yeah? Then you have the discussion about spatial justice, that what Edward Sawyer was talking about, that when you live in the city, your access to the basic amenities, to shops, to parks, define the quality of your life. So there are people that they live in better places, and there are people that they live in worse places. And this is exactly what spatial justice is about. But it's based on this very basic, fundamental nature of space. So the space in between A and B, which I called here space X, is always in a position of power, is in a position of control. So if you are in point A and you want to go to point B, you need to cross this space X. And if space X is a wall, for example, or it's a forbidden zone, so it could be kind of material aspect of this space, or it could be political or legal, then your access is limited. And as I said, this is something that I think it's very important to understand when we design, because if we think that it's not right, we would like to design just spaces, we would like to support inclusion, support equality, it means that we need somehow to deal with the problem of the space X. And it's not the relationship between A, X, and B. They are not kind of given forever. They are all created or constructed. So space X is important only if someone who is in space A really wants to go to space B. Okay, so the importance of space B makes the space X stronger, more in position of power. If I would be in space A and I'm not interested in going to space B, I don't care about space X. So to me, space X doesn't matter. And also space X, doesn't have any control over me and my life, because I'm just not interested to crossing this space. But if I want to go to space B, then I need to cross space X, and space X is important, is in a position of power. So my question here is what we can do about it, how we can deal with this controlling elements in any spatial relationship. And I'm using Nancy Fraser discussion on justice and injustice. Of course, Nancy Fraser never worked in space, so she was never trying to use her discussion on justice and injustice in a spatial terms. So it's a kind of my suggestion, my proposal, because I found it extremely useful, and I would try to show you and also illustrate, giving some examples why it's important, why it could be useful to us. So Nancy Fraser is using two strategies. She's proposing that there could be affirmative strategy and transformative strategy when we are dealing with injustice. So affirmative strategy is based on external forces that they are providing certain regulations, diminishing the power of space X and allowing us to go to space B. So in a British context, for example, we can think about right of way. So in British cities, sometimes you have not only cities, in a kind of rural context, even more common. So you could have a land, you could be an owner of the land, but because of certain regulations, mostly coming from the history, you also may be in a position to provide the access through your land, the land that you own, from space A or point A to space B. So this is a right of way. So it's a regulation, it's a legal framework that's diminishing or kind of reducing the power or authoritarian or controlling power of space X, because this is important that this access, this connection between A and B could be provided. So this is one way how we can deal with space and spatial relationships. So we can try to deal with space X in different way. You know, it's not only about legal issues, but also about providing better connection, I don't know, roads, elevators. Yeah, so kind of also the purely kind of material architecture tools are available to deal with. The second strategy that Nancy Fraser is proposing is transformative strategy. So transformative strategy is something slightly different. It's not really negating or trying to impose any particular regulations on space X. It's rather trying to find other ways, other routes to get from A to B. And the best example is probably underground, metro. So if you think about how metro works, instead of trying to go from one building or one place into the city to the other through the surface, you know, using pavements, roads, and all of this, which, you know, sometimes could be problematic because of many different reasons, you use metro, which is providing you quick, easy access between point A and B. So this is what transformative strategy is. It's not about imposing and changing the nature of space X, but it's based on assumption that there could be more. There could be other ways to get there. Of course, and it is interesting because, of course, Nancy Fraser suggests that this is the better strategy. But what I found problematic here or at least potentially problematic, that transformative strategy could be executed only if there was an emptiness, only if there was a void between or beyond A, X, and B. So there's assumption that there was nothing underground. Yeah, okay, there's a ground, of course, we need to dig it, but kind of apart from that, apart from this work or labor that we need to put there, there's nothing else. There's it's easy to do this, which not only is the case because this transformative strategy could, in a kind of extreme situation, could justify colonialism. Yeah, you can say that let's destroy something, or we don't see that there was something important here. There was an emptiness, there's a void, and we are using this void to make a connection from A to B. So this is the digression. I'm not going to go deeper into this, but just to kind of warn you that nothing is easy, nothing is straightforward. So I hope that it makes sense, this introduction concerning the space. And now I would like to talk a little bit more about the inclusivity and radical inclusivity in a sense. Because radical inclusivity sounds, everything what we call radical as something, as a kind of fantasy, as a utopian project that it's impossible to allow everybody to be together. But I'm hoping to show you a few examples that the element of inclusion on different levels of spatial projects, it's already there. It's already used, it already exists. So it's not, what I'm proposing, it's not really kind of utopian thinking. It's rather to take very particular perspective when we think about designing, using tools that we already have in our box. It's what we already can do. So I have 5 kind of strategies or 5 approaches to build environment to talk about inclusivity. The first one, I call it technical, and it's a focus on interaction between the user or users and the building. And this is two very different, concerning a scale, very different examples. One, as you probably recognize, is Alejandro Aravena, this famous project that was published almost everywhere, and he got a lot of prizes for that. The idea was very simple, that instead of designing housing for social housing, and he had very limited budget, so he decided to design and to build only kind of half of the house with the most important amenities, and then allow people. Then on this photograph, you still see some gaps between this concrete slabs. So he allows people to fill the gap. So this is the kind of openness of built structure, that instead of designing everything till the end, we can allow people to fill the gap, to adjust spaces in the way that they would like to do. On another photograph, this is housing by OMA, by Den Koolhaas in Rotterdam, which has a very different approach. It's very definedly designed till the very small details, because the whole apartments are relatively small, but there's almost every element in this apartment is used in a kind of flexible way. So as you see here, the bed, it's part of the wall, but it could then become the bed. The same with chairs, with tables. So everything is designed as a kind of with second function. So nothing is designed just as it is, but everything is designed to create more flexibility, to more opportunity. So this is the one strategy, this kind of openness of interpretation of the space. The second, which I called diagonal geometry, is something very, very simple. And there's two examples. One is Meccano, designed by Meccano library in Delft, and another is by Snohetta. It's an opera in Oslo, as you probably recognize. And it's a very, very simple approach that instead of designing walls or roofs, in both these cases, we have something that it's kind of diagonal something, the diagonal surface that's working as a roof, but at the same moment, it also works as a space, as a public space, as a square. So again, it's kind of allowing the building to become something more. It opens the building to unexpected new interpretations. Not in the way that people can change something, like in project in Aravena, because in Aravena case, the change happens once. Yeah, those are people just making this intervention. They build something. That's it. In this case, the space is just open to different usage. The third way is related to time, and this is again something that we are fully aware of that, but very often we forget about it. So none of spaces that we design are used, or almost none, because I can imagine, warehouse or I don't know, kind of nuclear power plant, something like that. But most of spaces that we design are used during the day, during the week, during the year, during the kind of longer period of time, differently. So, lecture theater is used by different groups of people. Space in I don't know, social or culture center could be used for workshop in painting, and then could be used by I don't know, dance classes, and so on, so on. So this element of time allows us to think about spaces in a much more inclusive, flexible time. It allows us to think that different groups, sometimes in a very different interest, people who will never meet together and never would be inclined to have any conversation, but space, when we add time, can be used by very different people. Sometimes, as I said, even even hostile to each other. But space could serve all of them, and I think that this is also very important for us to remember that not necessarily, not always, we need to try to overcome hostility, overcome tension between people in this kind of direct way. That it's not necessary that suddenly, all people will become friends. They still can use our spaces, our buildings, our spatial interventions, and they don't need to be friends. The third way of thinking is about language that we are using. This is the building designed by BIG. It's a power plant, but as you probably can see on the roof, there's this kind of white roof. It's a ski slope. So this is a very interesting example of coding a space, coding the building as a multifunctional object, but giving them different narratives, different stories. So it's not only about functions, which is probably the most important here, but it's also, it challenges us that maybe we don't have a word to call this building yet. We don't really have this this particular, kind of types and names like school or hospital. And maybe this is something also what is blocking our thinking, that when we work in a very strict typology, and we are using this terminology that it's a defining particular function on particular buildings, then we are not able to think that it could be something else. It could be something more, not only school, not only hospital, not only shop, not only power plant. And the final examples that I would like to present, this is the project done by my very famous colleague from Sheffield, Professor Doina Petrescu, who is expert. She's also practicing architect, but she's using architecture not for the sake of creating material objects as such. Architecture for her is always tool to achieve something else. So this project is in Paris. There was this kind of void gap between these two buildings, and she helped the local community to create this kind of garden center. So it was built from the scratch by local people. But before it happened, there was a long process of public participation, public consultation, discussing, designing, negotiating, before something was created. And again, it's not, even if it works, people are using this, it's not so important what it is, but it's much more important what she was able to achieve, that these people who are living there, they created community. They start to meet, interact, because, and thanks to her project. So, as I said, the inclusivity, or even radical inclusivity, is not something that doesn't exist. It's rather the question: are we brave enough to see this? And when I was starting to think about it in this 2015, almost exactly in the same time, there was kind of scandal, or the discussion in the UK about Tesco. Tesco is, I don't know if you have this in Bahrain, it's a Scottish or British supermarket chain. And in one place, in one shop in London, they put these spikes, the steel spikes, to prevent homeless people to use the space in front of the shop. So the justification for that was that the shop is for buying food, and we just don't want this poor, smelly people to be nearby, because our clients doesn't like it. And one night, the local activists, as you see on this photograph, they just put concrete on the spikes and kind of destroy them to allow the space to be used by other people. And then you have few other examples. Some of them are real, some of them are kind of artistic interventions, showing the elements of exclusivity. Yeah, the photograph nearby this activist, this under the highway. This is very interesting, because clearly it's relatively difficult to imagine how the space could be used. But someone make a decision that whatever could happen is not going to happen, because I'm going to make these spikes, these concrete spikes, to prevent anybody to use this space in any way. So it's almost this kind of architecture of hatred. It's architecture that's it's not able to give any good to users, to people, but in purpose is just making our lives more limited, more miserable. So as I said, it's radical inclusivity is not about having or not having tools. It's about very particular approach to design process. It's always a question: who else can use it? What else could happen in our space? How particular part of our building could serve, to other groups of users, humans and not humans. And this is, few examples that my students have been doing when they were trying to use this thinking. So this is a model of a paper factory. So these tubes are part of the paper factory. It was internal space. It was designed in Poland. In Poland, during winter, it could be -15, -20, so it's pretty cold. And if you're a homeless person, there's a risk that you will just die. Okay, so what one student was proposing here, he decided to use this internal heat that it's a part of technological process to heat this kind of temporary emergency shelter by just creating this niche. Yeah, so it doesn't really need much. It's not, kind of massive investment. It will not make the project more expensive. But it potentially could save somebody's life. And this is one of examples of this kind of particular approach to architecture that's trying to do good things rather to bad things. And this is another proposal more complex when the space was designed and was thought in the way that there was certain scenarios. Who can use this space in what way? So this is a certain design methodology that, it's probably nothing new, nothing really, you are probably fully familiar with that. But the testing design projects in series of scenarios, kind of thinking what else could happen, who else could use it and how. And by creating these scenarios, the student was able to open up his design and to create this, again, more inclusive, more open to different activities. Another project, very briefly, as again, kind of method of design, which I think is really interesting. So this project was not designed through plan sections, but was designed through activities that they were materialized in models. So again, there was a set of scenarios, what could happen, who could be involved, what these people can do, and then students, it was a group of students, they were designing spaces for particular activities to happen. And then the whole project was kind of growing as a collection of activities embedded in particular spaces and particular material infrastructure. So it was really kind of bottom up design methodology instead of starting with kind of master plan, and they are moving into plan of the building, and then you're going starting from 1 to 200 and going into details and so forth. What they have done, they kind of went exactly opposite direction, starting from small details and then building up the whole project. And what I was talking about so far was mostly about people, but what there is no people, or what if we open our thinking beyond human beings? And this is what I was trying to do with my students this year, that we ask ourselves, can we design architecture and spaces not only for humans, not only for human as users, but also for other species, for birds, for animals, for fishes. it was a very short experiment, kind of to start, not to be so anthropocentric. For 1 week, we have been testing idea of designing only for not humans. But then, of course, we went back to more kind of holistic approach when we discuss how different species can live in the same space. And that's it really for today. This is everything what I would like to say. Thank you very much. I hope that it was not too boring. And yeah, if you have any questions, comments, I'm very, very happy to answer or discuss or to be proved wrong, if you disagree with what I said.
Thank you, Dr. Krzysztof, for this interesting talk. And the floor is open for anyone who has any question or comments. Anyone?
Hello. I have
Hello.
a question actually. My name is Vaughn. First of all, thank you, Mr. Krzysztof, for your lecture. I think it's a very interesting approach to rethinking the way we approach buildings and architecture. Actually, I was specifically interested in the idea where you mentioned the bottom-up approach, where we are thinking about the activities that are happening inside the buildings first and then moving forward. Would that mean on defining activities as in and their spatial requirements first? From what aspect? Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, well, this project, so thank you very much for the question. And this project was a student project, of course. So they had the idea what they want to achieve. And the idea was exactly about involve more people. It was factory. So they designed the factory, but it was kind of open factory with ability to the whole families to work there. So the idea was also to create spaces, so kind of crash or kindergarten that could be close to place where people work. So it's not that you just put your child to the crash and then go to work, and after that you come back. There was the idea to make this kind of close to each other and to allow parents to interact with their kids kind of in between they work activities. So there was a very, 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 very strict, very clear brief for the project. And then they kind of started to imagine in details what does it mean, how it should be designed, how much time people can get, how much time then it will take for them to go from one place to another. So I think that it was possible only because there was, as I said, there's a very, very clear brief with a relatively defined activities and the kind of timeline of activities, and also users of actors that are involved in that. It would be probably much more difficult to do this, to use this kind of approach, and at the same moment to be much more open to kind of evolution of the brief. Okay, so I'm not saying that what I'm suggesting is really straightforward. It's easy. There are contradictions, obvious contradictions here, but I still think it's a valued, it's interesting, it's important, and potentially useful way to design. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yes, you have. Definitely, I think it's definitely interesting because instead of just approaching just the form of the building, we're thinking of the interior, let's say, spatial quality, and then we're moving forward with how this building could look. So yes, thank you so much for your time and your answer.
Yeah, if I can just comment very briefly on that. as Reem said, at that moment I'm teaching only MA students, which it's nice. But in the past, I was leading year one for 3 years. So year one, teaching year one, it's a sometimes very challenging work, but I really enjoy it because it also allows you to do to kind of set the scene. So people who are coming to year one, they don't really know what to expect, and they kind of trust you that what you tell them is right. So I think that it's better to teach year one than, for example, year two, when students already know. So when I was teaching year one of the very first examples of projects that I asked students to do, and you need to teach students basics, how to draw plan sections. Yeah, so this kind of surveying and drawing, architecture convention drawings. This is kind of important. But the way how we did it, we asked them to survey their own rooms. So most of our students are living in students' accommodations. So almost all of these rooms are very similar. So in the beginning, we have been a little bit nervous that it will be boring. All of them will do exactly the same. But when we ask them to measure it, and then we ask them also to inhabit the space, to measure the spaces using the ergonomics as the way of kind of evaluating the spaces. And then there was also the small workshop that I have done with students that it was called What Annoys You? So I asked them to think about the space that was provided to them and to see what doesn't work. And I think that it was a very interesting and very useful exercise, that they exactly started to understand that architecture could be seen and maybe should be seen and should be tested through our own bodies. So through from these small details, and some of them were bringing really small details about part of the furniture that there was no opening fully, or it was squeaking or something like that. And then there was also discussion about the different size of bodies. In the UK, there's a kind of assumption that human being is kind of 170. But I had some students from Asia, and they were really tiny, kind of 150. And for them, these spaces were awful. They were not really able to use it because everything was just too big, too far away, and so on, so on. So I think that this approach of constantly referring to human body, human activities, it is important. This is something that I try to remind my students all the time. Now, as I said, we kind of expanded beyond human users. We also try to think about other species. But I kind of still believe that this kind of small details, this kind of testing the spaces we design through the kind of minor activities, is very, very important, is useful. Sorry for, kind of blabbling too long.
No, of course, it's actually so much interesting. It's a very interesting approach, and I think us as architecture students, especially not in the master's level yet, inshallah in the future, it's important for us to understand that the human scale is something that is what makes a building work. It's the difference between what works and what doesn't. So no, it's a definitely interesting point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Koshba?
Hello, Dr. Krzysztof. Thank you for an insightful presentation. It's amazing to see how you are trying to show one concept through different scales. And this is where my question comes across. What do you think about these marginal spaces that happen across the cities, which is essentially shown by you in one of these pictures, where they have put up these needle-like structures all across under the bridge, where you're restricting people to enter. And you showed this building with a space between the two buildings being used for a very good activity. It was a thought-provoking idea by one of your colleagues that you mentioned. So how do you see these marginal spaces working towards building towards the city infrastructure as such, and what if those became a network as such during the planning process itself? So they could be a network of, say, interconnected activity spaces, or some sort of green spaces, productive spaces, or something.
Yeah, I strongly believe that this is exactly the way how the urban spaces should be approached. And well, it's a partly legal framework, kind of allowing certain flexibility for spaces. What could happen, because what Doina is doing, and it's also interesting that at some point, especially when you are really designing something big, you need to have support from the government. One of the most successful projects, it's a kind of urban farm. So it's a place where the food is produced, but there's also space for people to train, and it is also in France. She's an interesting person because she works with us, but she lives in Paris, so she's commuting from Paris to Sheffield. But this project, and they got some European prize of the kind of political innovations, I think 2 or 3 years ago. But it was interesting that this project was kind of moving from place to place, because it was built in one part of the kind of Paris metropolitan area, and then the government changed, and government said that we don't like it. They said, oh, it's kind of leftist idea. We don't want it. We are going to demolish this and build, I don't know, parking or whatever. So they need to move the whole structure, the build structure, from one place, from one location to another, where the government was welcoming them, kind of supporting what they are doing. And what was really interesting, that because, as I said, her architecture is really embedded in social interactions. So the people who were involved in this project, for them, kind of moving from one place to another, of course, it was painful, but it was possible. So they achieved to do this. They were, able to make the difference. So I think that it's a question of kind of legal planning framework, that the city should make a decision that this kind of experimental spaces is what city wants to have. And then, as you said, it could be network, but it could be that there could be also kind of local, serving very small local activities, kind of gaps of space. And again, I was trying to do something. I was doing something like that with my year one students, which again, when we proposed this, some of my colleagues were really scared. It's crazy to ask year one students to do this. But we had some kind of live project exercise. So we asked students, we told them, find a place in the city, any place you like, that it's you think that it's not kind of not fulfilling the whole potential. Then you need to find the owner or someone who managing the space to get permission, and then you need to design and build something that, in your opinion, will improve the quality of the space, will bring something else, something new to the space. And to my surprise, it was extremely successful. Students were working in groups, about 10 people. So, there was a lot of people, enough to deal with that. But it worked very, very well. And it kind of proved that the spaces like that exist, and they were welcomed by people. Yeah? So these interventions that students did they had local support. You know, there was people living nearby. They were very happy that something happened. Okay, so I think that it is possible to do this, but you know, there was a need for.
Needs a lot of effort.
It's a lot of effort, and you know, our students were working for free. Okay, so there's also element of that students are kind of cheap labor, we can say, but you know, we can say there's a volunteering. Yeah? So they were kind of giving something from themselves to local communities, and you know, they were not paid for doing this.
Sure. Thank you so much, Professor. I think it's a great lecture. Thank you for giving such an insightful lecture.
Thank you very much. I was trying not to disappoint, but
You didn't. Thank you very much. If there is any more questions or comments, or I think I would like to thank you for joining us, for giving us your time and this insightful presentation. And I would definitely we would like to welcome you in the coming time, inshallah. And thank you again.
No, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure, and thank you very much for your questions. I'm always very happy to meet again if you think that it will be useful for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you all for
Bye.
coming.
Thank you. Bye bye.